Remember this controversy? Right after the release of Dragon Age the Veilguard, the primary conversation around the game wasn't about whether or not it was good, it wasn't about the merits or the demerits of the game, but how large the flop had been, how sizable a failure which it was, or, alternatively, if we could somehow define it as a success. Oh well. I argued quite vehemently at the time that if the discussion is how big of a crater it made, rather than talking about the merits of its story, or its characters, or its questlines, etc., then it was probably a pretty big failure. But no, Go Woke, Go Broke is a false narrative. This game is owning those darn chuds once and for all. And the mainstream media, of course, was in lockstep behind them. Dragon Age the Veilguard launched beats Jedi Survivor to make it EA's biggest ever single-player game on Steam. Wow! It's also probably EA's second ever single-player game released on Steam. At the very least of that size, but hey, details, right? But nevertheless, clearly, this disproves the Go Woke, Go Broke. Dragon Age the Veilguard, despite being a very boring, badly made, and woke as hell video game, is topping the charts. Wow. Well, was it now? Was it now, really? I argued that at the time, of course, that with the amount of time put into the game of a studio the size of Bioware, the sales figures were probably rather disappointing. And now we have EA adjusting their revenue goals again, down, of course. And they blame EA Sports FC 2025, which was released in September to mixed reviews. The company introduced a refresh this month, and the role-playing game Dragon Age Veilguard. And by how much did it fail to live up to their expectations? Was it a smidgen? Was it at least close? Nope, about 50%. It sold half as much as they had expected it to do. Now that's tasty, isn't it? And I want to point out as well, so if we look at Dragon Age the Veilguard's concurrence here, so the peak was 89,000, so about 90,000 people. Now, a lot of us watching the game was actually fairly surprised by that. That was more than I'd anticipated, frankly. It was more than a lot of people had thought. I thought the game would do maybe like 50, 60, because it's still a fairly large game. You know, it's Dragon Age at the end of the day, but 90, well, that was actually rather good, considering just how much negative PR the game had picked up. But this then was less than 50% of what they hoped for, bearing in mind of course that concurrent and sales are not one-to-one. But so they had hoped for about 180,000 concurrents, so take that number and quadruple it maybe for sales, and that's what they'd hoped for. Less than 1 million for Dragon Age the Veilguard? I mean, that's a major Bioware title, a major Dragon Age title, and their optimistic estimates was less than 1 million copies sold. With this being also, I remind you, their widest release, not just Origins, but on Steam as well. I think EA already knew that they probably had a stinker on their hands, and they were trying to be optimistic whilst being realistic about it as well, and even that estimate was nowhere even close to being met. 50%. That is very, very nasty. That probably means that the game, at best, maybe covered its development cost, possibly, which means, of course, that the company is then going to run into a deficit the day after releasing it, so that's not great either. And they probably cut all future plans for developing the game further, I would imagine. And again, remember that we talked about yesterday how their director left, and it had nothing to do with Veilguard's commercial performance. I don't know. Are we still buying that line? I don't think so. I really don't. I really don't at all. And just as a little bit of a cherry on top, on their official Reddit here, or the fan Reddit, can we please ban Twitter links as well? I really like that one. It's like, people on Twitter are being awfully mean to us. Could we ban it? And as well, now, it's actually already banned. Twitter links are already banned. And this has happened on several Reddits now, where Reddit, which is the biggest, most insular hug box on the internet, is making itself even bigger, more insulated and hugboxy, because the world around them, well, it just don't agree with them whatsoever anymore. And the reason here is, Twitter, due to its affiliation with someone associated with the Nazi ideology. Jesus Christ. Reddit. You will forever remain a very large mistake. Honestly, people will put up archaeological threads in the far-flung future. They'll be having vast forum discussions on what went so incredibly wrong in the 2015s, the 2020s, and so on. And they'll pretty much be finding back to this. A highly stratified society with extraordinarily divided groups of people who do everything in their power to isolate themselves from another, and they will come up with any ridiculous excuse whatsoever to do it. It's just fantastic. And it's just absolutely fantastic to me. Even again, when the evidence is just staring you right in the face as well. So, Electronic Arts have now come out, officially stated that no, Dragon Age the Veilguard did not show the damn chuds anything. In fact, it seemed to have reinforced their point yet again. Hey, if nothing else, EA is being very consistent along with the rest of the gaming industry, so that's something, I guess. And with the purchase that we talked about yesterday, maybe there are some changes on the horizon. Maybe numbers like these have finally grown large enough to begin scaring corporations. I personally think so. Whether or not the transformation can happen in time to save any of them, well, that's a different question entirely, particularly if they are indeed now thinking about increasing the price of their games to $100 or round about there to align themselves with Grand Theft Auto 6. Again, this is not the right time to do so, with an enormous competitor now on the Asian market rising out after having suddenly realized, holy shit, there is no competition. This is not the time to be playing with politically nonsensical things like Dragon Age the Veilguard. It is not the time to double the cost of video games by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, this is the time to grab hold of conservatism as hard as possibly and simply double down on what you actually do well. If Bioware has any sense, it is going to release the next Mass Effect game as the most conservative Mass Effect game ever. It should be filled with hot alien waifus. It should be basically just shooting shit every day, all day, and with a final plotline to overthrow the government like the first one did. If they do that, then we'll know for sure that something rather seismic has occurred within the industry, but again, we're probably still 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years away from that, unfortunately. Until then, all we can really do is continue to point out the failures and the mistakes, hoping that everything will, or everybody more correctly, will learn from it. And yes, by the way, I will absolutely be applying this to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 as well. I did see a rather nonsensical thing on Twitter the other day, where apparently one of their community managers had been asked the question, hey, why weren't there any gay questlines in the first game if Henry had always been like gay or bi? And apparently the community manager had responded, budgetary restrictions. Now, part of me wants to be charitable and take that as a joke because it does sound a bit like one, but this is really not the time. So yeah, I will be watching that release with a rather intense stare to see if there is anything else in the game that will prove me incorrect on my position of giving them the benefit of the doubt. We'll see. Hey, at least Dragon Age the Veilguard, communicated its failures more loudly. That is something we can praise the game for. It was loud and proud, and thus saved a lot of money for a lot of people. See, EA's not so bad. At least they're honest about it, quote unquote. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.